Welcome to the deep dive. So, we all want to know how to spot toxic people in our lives.
Absolutely. It's like a universal survival skill at this point.
Yeah, but actually defining psychopathy, like really pinning it down, is incredibly difficult. So today we are jumping right into a deep dive on some brand new statistical research that finally, cuts through the pop culture noise.
And it really is noise out there.
Totally. Our grounding source today is this really insightful article from Psychology Today by Dr. Susan Krauss-Whitborn. It's called "The Three Core Qualities of Psychopaths Get a New Look." And what we're going to explore is a functional, real-world blueprint for spotting these individuals.
Which is so fascinating because, science is basically trying to quantify a personality type that is famously, almost aggressively good at hiding its true nature.
Right, they're like the ultimate chameleons.
Sure.
But before we get into the new blueprint, we kind of have to understand why researchers have failed to agree on a definition for, like, nearly a century.
100 years of diagnostic wreckage, basically.
100 years? I mean, how does the entire scientific community argue over the basic definition of something so heavily studied? What was the roadblock there?
Well, it really came down to a fundamental flaw in the primary tool we use in psychology, which is the self-reporting questionnaire.
Oh, right, like taking a survey.
Exactly. The standard method for measuring a trait is to just give someone a test and ask them to rate their own behavior. But if you think about the core pathology of a psychopath...
They're liars.
Exactly. Deceit, manipulation, impression management, these are their defining features. So expecting a psychopath to sit down, fill out a piece of paper, and honestly admit to being ruthless and manipulative, it's just the scientific dead end.
It's like asking a bank robber to fill out a customer satisfaction survey on their own heist.
That is exactly what it's like.
You're literally relying on a pathological liar to accurately report their lies. I mean, if they really are a psychopath, the very first thing they're going to do is con the test itself.
Yeah, the very nature of the condition actively prevents the accurate measurement of it. It's this brilliant, frustrating catch-22.
Okay, I totally get the limitation of a written survey. But wait, aren't they all just criminals? Can't we just study people in prison to figure this out? We don't need their honesty if we have their rap sheet.
And see, that was the predominant logic for decades. Researchers flocked to the prison system because, you had a captive audience with documented histories of extreme antisocial behavior.
Right, their actions speak louder than their surveys.
Sure, but using criminal behavior as the baseline created a massive new problem. It completely skewed the data because it ignored this huge demographic known as the successful psychopath.
A successful psychopath. That sounds like a terrifying business strategy.
It is terrifyingly real. When researchers only studied inmates, they were essentially only studying the unsuccessful psychopaths.
The ones who got caught.
Right, the ones whose lack of impulse control landed them in jail. But there is this parallel population of non-offenders, people who have the exact same core traits, the ruthlessness, the manipulation, the superficial charm, but they channel it all into socially acceptable or even highly rewarded avenues.
Oh, wow. So instead of, like, committing a physical crime that puts them in a supermax prison, they use that same psychological machinery to ruthlessly climb the corporate ladder.
Precisely. Or they become highly influential politicians or, cutthroat surgeons. Think about a CEO who orchestrates a hostile takeover, liquidates thousands of jobs, ruins entire communities, and then sleeps perfectly soundly that night.
Completely unbothered by the human cost.
Exactly. Unbothered. They haven't broken the law. Actually, their board of directors probably gave them a massive bonus for that exact ruthlessness.
So if you make criminality a requirement for the diagnosis, you miss the CEO completely.
You miss them entirely. You end up diagnosing the impulsive bank robber, but the field eventually realized, hey, if a psychological trait makes one person a murderer and another person a Fortune 500 executive, the criminality itself cannot be the defining mechanism.
Criminality is just a symptom of how they apply it, not the psychology itself. That makes so much sense. So they needed a theory that decoupled the personality from the rap sheet.
Right. They needed a unified framework to capture the architecture of the mind, regardless of whether that mind belonged to a convict or a corporate executive. And that necessity is what birthed the triarchic model of psychopathy.
The triarchic model. Our source material really leans into this. It basically takes a century of messy research and boils it down to three specific domains, right? Disinhibition, meanness, and boldness.
Yeah, those three domains represent the behavioral pillars. So disinhibition is that tendency toward impulsivity, recklessness, just a complete lack of constraint.
Well, okay, let's unpack this. Our source uses this really specific anecdote about a guy named Nicholas and his problematic friend that I think illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, the fun friend. Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah. So this friend is fiercely charismatic, right? Like the life of the party. You have a great time with him. But then he casually brags about dining and dashing, and he lies straight to his girlfriend's face without breaking a sweat. And he's just totally unbothered by it. How does Nicholas's fun friend fit into this dark triarchic model? And, like, does having a great time blind us to the red flags?
It absolutely blinds us. If we break down the friend's behavior, the dining and dashing is a textbook example of that first pillar, disinhibition. It's an impulsive thrill-seek.
Right, totally disregarding social rules.
Exactly. Then there's the second pillar, meanness. Now, in clinical terms, this isn't just being unpleasant. It's a severe affective deficit.
What a total lack of empathy.
Yes, a disdain for emotional attachments, a tendency toward exploitation. So lying to his partner without a shred of remorse, that falls squarely into meanness.
Wow. And then we have the third pillar, which honestly seems the most complicated to me, which is boldness.
Boldness is the tricky one. It's characterized by fearlessness, intense social dominance, and this almost bulletproof charm.
Which is exactly what makes that friend so fun to hang out with. It's that magnetic pull.
Right. But Dr. Whitbourne's article notes that boldness is notoriously evasive for researchers to measure. It yields really mixed results depending on if you use a self-report or an in-person clinical interview.
Why is an interview so different?
Because boldness acts as a psychological camouflage. If you bring someone with high boldness into an interview, they don't look disordered. They look confident. They're engaging.
They use the charm on the clinician.
Exactly. They disarm the interviewer. Boldness masks the meanness and the disinhibition. It's the shiny, charismatic wrapper hiding a really toxic core.
I mean, the theory makes intuitive sense. You've got a reckless person who lacks empathy hiding behind extreme charm. But a theory is just a theory, right? Proving that these three specific domains actually, like, mathematically cluster together in a human mind is a completely different challenge.
Oh, completely. To see if this model holds water, researchers had to subject it to a really intense mathematical stress test.
Which brings us to the 2026 study by Kai Bray and Laura Drisslane at the University of Mississippi, published in the Journal of Personality.
Yes. They didn't just ask people if they felt bold or mean. They used an advanced statistical technique called network analysis.
Right. And they took a sample of 612 undergraduate students. So they ran them through this massive battery of assessments. But, wait, 612 undergraduate students.
I know where you're going with this.
I have to challenge this. Does testing a bunch of 19 and 20-year-old college kids really give us an accurate, real-world picture of dark, manipulative psychopathy? I mean, college kids are practically defined by being reckless and bold.
This raises an important question, and the authors actually openly acknowledge it as a limitation. A more representative adult sample, across different socioeconomic backgrounds would definitely be preferable.
Right, like people in their 40s with actual careers.
Sure, but the demographic becomes a bit less of an issue when you realize what the researchers were actually measuring. They weren't trying to find out how many psychopaths were enrolled at Ole Miss.
Okay, so they weren't diagnosing these kids. What were they looking for then?
They were looking for structural integrity. They wanted to see how the traits structurally fit into the statistical model. In a standard test, you just add up points, right? Network analysis ignores the final score and maps the relationships between every single individual answer.
Dr. Whitbourne has a great visual for this in the article. She says to imagine every test item as a node, like a little circle.
Yes, exactly.
And the relationship between any two answers is an edge, which is a line connecting the circles. And the thickness of that line represents the degree of overlap. So it's like looking at a detective's string board, where the thickest strings reveal the most undeniable connections.
That is a perfect analogy. Network analysis acts as an architectural stress test. It shows you which behaviors support other behaviors. And most importantly, it identifies the load-bearing wall.
The load-bearing wall of the personality.
Right. In network analysis, they call this centrality, or a statistical hub.
So if a student answers yes to extreme impulsivity, the math calculates the probability they also answered yes to lacking empathy and draws a thick string between them.
Precisely. And by mapping thousands of these strings, they find the one central hub. The specific trait that, if you were to remove it, the whole dark personality structure would just collapse.
So when Bray and Drisslane finally ran all this data, mapping every node and edge for those 612 participants, what emerged as the load-bearing wall? Which of the three was it?
Out of boldness, disinhibition, and meanness, the network analysis definitively proved that meanness is the grand central station.
Meanness.
Yes, it emerged as the most influential quality across the entire network. Psychopaths are fundamentally incapable of understanding how others feel, which drives all that callousness and aggression.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because meanness sounds like, I don't know, a playground insult, like someone stealing your lunch money.
Hmm.
But the study connects this simple word to some incredibly heavy historical concepts.
It really does.
The math actually confirmed early historical writings that described psychopathy using two very specific chilling terms, lovelessness and guiltlessness.
Lovelessness and guiltlessness?
Yeah, I just marvel at how those words cut entirely through the clinical jargon. We aren't talking about someone being a bit grumpy. We're talking about a total void of humanity.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains the why. To understand how this void functions as the engine, we have to distinguish between two different types of empathy. Because, surprisingly, psychopaths are masters of one of them.
Wait, really? Psychopaths have empathy?
Cognitive empathy, not affective empathy, and that distinction is everything. Cognitive empathy is the intellectual ability to recognize what someone is feeling. Like, I can see that my action will make you angry.
Yeah. So they understand the emotion, they just don't care.
Exactly. They have incredibly high cognitive empathy, which makes them such effective con artists. They read the room perfectly, push your buttons, mimic emotions.
They know where the emotional levers are.
Yes, but they completely lack affective empathy, which is the actual visceral sharing of an emotion. It's what makes you feel a pang of distress when you see someone crying.
The biological root of compassion.
Right. Psychopaths have zero affective empathy. They see your pain intellectually, but they are completely insulated from feeling it. And when you realize that affective empathy is entirely missing, that you have true lovelessness and guiltlessness, it makes perfect sense why meanness is the central hub.
Empathy is basically the psychological brake pedal for human behavior, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
We all have moments where we want to do something selfish or bold, but we stop. We anticipate the shared pain, and we stop.
But if you operate with a callous disregard for others, if there is no brake pedal,
then the boldness and the disinhibition have nothing holding them back. A person who is just bold and disinhibited but has empathy might just be an extreme sports athlete. They seek thrills, but they don't want to hurt anyone.
but introduce meanness to the mix.
You create a predator. The meanness naturally paves the way for them to manipulate and dominate through reckless actions. Meanness is the engine.
Wow. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Because in real life, you don't have the luxury of handing someone a rigorous network analysis questionnaire on a first date.
No, definitely not.
And even if you did, they'd just actively con the test anyway, using that cognitive empathy to lie.
Exactly. You cannot rely on traditional metrics, and you have to stop looking for cinematic criminal behavior.
No movie villains monologuing their evil plans.
Right. They're going to use that extreme boldness to throw up a smokescreen of charm and success. So the actionable takeaway here is to start looking for the emotional connection, or rather, the lack thereof.
How do you pierce the smokescreen, practically speaking?
Shift your perspective away from the grand, charming gestures. Monitor the micro moments. Look for the collateral damage in their life. When they hurt someone, do they offer a genuine apology or do they immediately pivot to managing their own image?
You're looking for that void, a highly successful person who is just entirely unburdened by guilt.
Yes, a one-sided emotional ledger. If you're constantly making excuses for someone's fun, reckless behavior, but you suddenly realize they have never once demonstrated genuine concern for your well-being, that is your red flag.
Yeah.
Forewarned is forearmed. You just have to stop being blinded by the shiny wrapper of boldness.
Look past the charm and search for the guiltlessness. Which actually leaves us with a final kind of provocative thought to ponder after this deep dive is over.
Okay, what is it?
Well, we've established that meanness, this chilling combination of lovelessness and a lack of effective empathy, is the true core of psychopathy. And we know these successful psychopaths thrive by channeling this guiltlessness into climbing corporate ladders and political hierarchies.
Right.
So, are modern institutions actually designed to organically filter these people out?
Yeah.
Or have we inadvertently built economic systems that actively reward the very trait that makes someone a psychopath? Like when we praise a CEO for making a ruthless but necessary decision that devastates thousands of lives,
Yeah.
are we simply validating the meanness?
Wow. Are we diagnosing the pathology or are we promoting it? That is a haunting
Um,
question.
It really makes you think. It's definitely something to critically evaluate the next time you find yourself admiring someone's uncompromising boldness at the very top of the food chain. So, with that, we'll leave you to look a little closer at the structural architecture of the people in your own life. Remember to look past the boldness and always check the load-bearing walls.